Welcome to ChinaSource Conversations. My name is Joanne Pittman, and today we're talking with Mike Frith, the founder and director of a UK-based ministry called OSCAR, which is an acronym of One Stop Center for Advice and Resources. We're delighted to be partnering with OSCAR to help inform global Christians about what God is doing in China and to point people towards opportunities to learn about and equip themselves for ministry among Chinese people. Welcome, Mike. Thanks for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And Mike is coming to us in this conversation. He's in London, so we're in quite different time zones. So Mike, I'd like to pose 3 questions to you. And the first question is, can you tell us who and what is OSCAR? What are you up to with this organization?
So OSCAR's been going 23 years, and basically our vision was to create a hub of lots of things related to mission so that people knew where to find them, particularly aimed at those individuals that are engaged in mission or interested, thinking about going. So yeah, it's quite a broad-ranging service that pulls all of that stuff together in one place. Born kind of in the time where those things were just starting to appear online, but there's no way of knowing about them unless somebody pulled it all together. So that's what we've done, and we've been doing it ever since, and it's grown and grown, and we serve a large portion of the mission community here.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I spend a fair amount of time poking around and seeing all of the opportunities for service and job openings and things like that. And it really is an amazing resource. So congratulations on 23 years. That's great. Now, I've noticed too in poking around and talking with you that one of the training courses that you offer, and you do offer a number of training courses, is one on it's called a British Culture Orientation course. And as I looked at that, and I thought, boy, that would be something, maybe useful for people who are interacting with immigrants. But can you tell me about your British Culture Orientation course?
So primarily that's been aimed at people who come into the UK from outside to do ministry or to work, and but it also can be useful for those who are working amongst people who come into the UK from outside. So there's 4 parts to it basically. First is we help them understand what culture is, because when you transition from one to another, just getting a handle on what that means. Then we do dig in a little bit to some of the quirky things in British culture that I know people find unusual in their early stages. So it's really, if you're working amongst people from other places around the world in the UK, it's quite good to understand what they find hard to get their heads around. Then after that, we talk about what it means to transition from one culture to another, what that process is all about. And then the last bit is, how does that process affect you as a person moving from one culture to another, particularly the bit when you arrive in a new culture and you're trying to get used to it? What do you go through mentally and spiritually in some cases as you get used to that new place? So that's kind of it. It's tends to be a day course when we've done it face to face, but we're also running this online, and we can do it in a condensed version in about 1.5 to 2 hours.
Oh, okay. So if somebody's interested, they would just contact you and either do it online or maybe ask you to come in and do it, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We do it with groups quite often as well. And I do stuff with the Salvation Army for all their folk that move into the UK from other territories around the world. So yeah, we do it with groups quite often.
Interesting. I do a fair bit of intercultural training myself, and trying to get people prepared for the quirkiness of American culture. And a minute ago, you mentioned some of the quirks of British culture. And so I'm just curious what a couple of those might be, maybe an example or two, what people who come in from the outside, whether they're coming from Asia or North America, what do they see as quirky about British culture?
Well, one of the things I even remarked today, because we're at an exhibition in London, and on the stand opposite where we are at this exhibition, there are 3 Americans. So we got talking today about some of this. And Americans tend to be very positive with each other in their relationships and very encouraging. Now, interestingly, Brits, when they get to know each other quite well, they start to be quite rude to each other, and you know, it can, to an outsider, it can look a little shocking sometimes about how they sort of, how this banter goes backwards and forwards. But I was remarking today how one of these three people who'd been here nearly a year had actually got quite used to that, and she was almost rude with me. And I thought, oh yeah, you've got used to it. That's good. So that is quite something. I think the first thing people think about us is they think we're very negative, but actually it's just a manner of being, really, that once you get used to, you realize, yeah, everybody's like that, and it's just the norm. Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that people coming in have sometimes a harder time adjusting to, right?
Yeah, they probably think we're a bit negative and a bit grumpy, and which we may well be, but maybe not quite to the degree that they initially see once they get used to it. Lots of
So
stuff
you
is
help
all about just getting used to it.
sure. So you help them understand sort of where that comes from, and
Yes, yeah,
how it plays out.
and spotting it and connecting with that. Yeah, but I think there's often a case for being slightly countercultural. We make allowances for people who come in from outside, as I think most cultures do.
Mm.
And so, one of the great things about being an outsider in a different culture is you can get away with an awful lot that you can't when
Mhm,
you're from within the culture. And I think that's sometimes a real advantage about being a cross-cultural worker.
mhm.
You don't have to be exactly like the locals are. You can be a little different. But yeah, we unpack quite a lot of things like mannerisms and stuff, and the way that you do things. Sometimes, like, there's a whole culture in the UK around the pub,
Mhm.
which, of course, if you come from a country where alcohol is really quite a no-no, in the Christian community, you then start to think, some of these Christians in the UK go to the pub.
Mm.
What's that all about? Is that like visiting a bar? Well, not really, because the pub has often been the heart of our small village communities, and there's churches in pubs now,
Mm.
and Christian groups that meet in pubs. So it's just interesting, gradually getting to understand what's very particular about the culture that you might initially think is, you know, shocking or very different, but after a while you realize. And we do try to unpack it a little bit. There's some good resources around that help you realize where that comes from historically, and that's a big help as well.
I've been reading a lot recently about a recent influx of immigrants from into the UK from China and
Mm,
from Hong Kong,
Hong
particularly as
Kong,
things have
yeah.
changed in Hong Kong, and how they're just really coming in, and they're coming into the churches, and the Christian community in the UK is saying, "What can we do? How can we help these? How can we help people adjust to life here?" So I'm wondering if you could maybe speak more specifically about how a course like this would be useful for churches or people ministering among the recent immigrants from China into the UK, and then how do they find out about it?
Yeah, I have already been talking to quite a few of them. There's down in the southwest of the UK, in one of the cities in Exeter, there's quite a large Christian community, Chinese community there, come out of Hong Kong, and the churches are actually really engaged in helping them. And we have an initiative in the UK called Welcome Churches, and they're enabling churches to bring these folk in and do various things for them. So I've had inquiries from them about how our course might help the groups that are setting up there. So we'll see whether that materializes. But yeah, very useful. And that specifically is to give the Chinese folk, the folk from Hong Kong, a bit of a heads up about some of the things in British culture that they would find remarkable. And I don't always know those, because I personally haven't had experience in Chinese culture. I haven't worked there. So it's quite interesting in my process of working with these people. I can find out from various folk that I know what were the pinch points for them. And I've known a Chinese student here who's worked here for a good number of years. She's actually done a little bit of work with Oscar, and she's written some stuff for me. So it's really useful to run everything that I have past her. And she can tell me, yeah, this is what I found quite strange right at the beginning. And So, enables me to help others who I know are going to go through that.
Great. Well, Mike, yeah, we're going to put this into a post on ChinaSource, and we will include in the post a link to Oscar and where they can go to find this course and some of the other fantastic resources that you have on your site. So I do again thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I know you've had a busy day in London, and we just pray God's blessing upon your work and your work there in the UK. And it's so great to talk to you.
Thank you. It's good to talk to you too. Thanks.